Raise your voices, raise your glass high. Welcome to the Drink O'Clock Podcast. Let's dive. Oh, grab an old fashioned and join the fray. Raise your spirits, let the music play. From the corner pub to the dance hall floor. Drink O'Clock Podcast, we're ready for more.
And we are live, barring the technical issues that is hit or miss on when you're doing a podcast virtually. This is the Drink O'Clock Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Valincius. I have the pleasure of having with me a fantastic author by the name of J.V. Hilliard. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you, sir, for having me. I appreciate that. And sorry about my bad technical karma. It follows me everywhere.
You know what, dude? It happens, and I've almost built it into my mind at this point. So it's seriously, it's either hit or miss. It's either a flawless thing, which when it happens, I'm like, oh my god, this is great. But in most cases, there's always something, and sometimes it's on my end. Like for some reason, I couldn't share the link with you because it would not pull from Squadcast, which is weird. It never does that ever. Normally, I just pull the link, send it over. It just would not load, so I had to pull the link from Podmatch, which also, it's like I'm shocked that it was still there and working perfectly there. But we made it through, man. Isn't that
here.
life?
We're here and now. We're ready to go, rock and rolling.
Yeah, I don't know if you're drinking. I
have
actually,
some lemon lime sparkling water this evening because I have several of these tonight, and it would probably lead to poor consequences if I partook and had partaken in a way that you would have wanted me to. So I apologize for that.
No. It's not a requirement on the show. I actually haven't been drinking in a while. Normally, I don't drink during the week. We just decided to say, hey, fuck it, we're going to have some drinks today, which is the nice thing, right? Instead of drinking, a couple every day, you could just say, nah, I'm not going to drink. And then when you decide you want to drink, it's cool, whatever. Well, trying to be healthier. I'm going to be 40 in a couple years. So,
there you go. It's closing in, my brother.
It's all downhill. It's all downhill. Once the moment you hit 30, it's all downhill, dude.
Yeah, I mean, you get to 35 and all of a sudden you're like, you're either at the top of the hill or you're just kind of cresting it and you're like, oh, and it's just going to go down from there. So trust me, I've been there, done that.
Yeah, I'll be 39 in July, so then I have the 1 year left of the 30s, and I'm not looking forward to it, man. But you know what? What are you gonna do? Time is the enemy. There's nothing you can do about it. It shit just moves.
Yeah.
Now you have two series, right? So you have the Warminster series, you have the Time and Tide series. I saw that for the Warminster series, you have 4 books. Starts with The Last Keeper, Vorden's Lair, the Trillius Gambit, and Echoes of Ghostwood. And then for Time and Tide, you have the Element of Time. Now, Time and Tide, I saw that you don't have any other books for that. Is that a one-hitter, or do you have a series plan for that?
It's a young adult 3-part series, and okay. Part 1 is the next. It's not out yet, but it's coming out by the end of the year. And I also have a couple of standalone novels for my first series, the Warminster Saga, that are going to be based on some of the more popular characters in them. And then that'll tie into a 2026 launch of the next series. So they're all based in the same world. So, like Middle Earth equals Tolkien and Westeros equals George Martin and Game of Thrones. Well, I have the realm of Warminster. So all of my books are based within the realm there. And so whether or not you're following one timeline and one set of characters, or you're reading the Element of Time, which is a different timeline and a different set of characters, it's all based in the same world, so that once you learn it, you kind of get it.
That's cool. It's funny because the town I work in is Warminster. It's in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I'm in Pittsburgh, so you must be outside of Philly,
nice.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah, right outside Philly, man.
Yeah, I got you. Not far from here.
That's funny. I saw it. I'm like, I work in fucking Warminster. This will be a fun combo.
Well, I took the name because it's a pretty badass name. I thought it was a pretty cool thing for sort of a medieval, city. It had that sort of like British kind of spin to it. And then one day I was in Philly and I saw that Warminster actually existed, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
That so you pulled it right from where I work, baby. Let's go. Yeah,
It was
that's where I work.
accidental or maybe serendipitous. I don't know which one it would be, but it's stuck and people like it, so I'll leave it go.
The world is circular, right? Everything fucking comes back to ground zero. That's how I look at it.
Philadelphia
Um,
is definitely ground zero.
Look, talk to me a little bit about growing up, man. What was it like growing up, and what made you want to be an author? Because I know everyone grows up thinking, you know what, I'm gonna be an author.
Yeah, well, for me it was a little different. I grew up with my uncle as my second dad, and he was a Marine that was paralyzed in combat, and so my
Oh
mom,
shit. Okay.
yeah, my mom was a his nurse, and it was like Willy Wonka, the original Willy Wonka. It's like we lived with my brother and I lived with my mom, with my uncle and my grandmother and grandfather. So it was like all of these relatives, one of which, was disabled, and my mom was kind of like the nurse for everybody. So like my brother and I would go to school and things like that. But I say that because he was very limited in what he could do as a quadriplegic, and some of the things he could do were things like writing. And he was able to play Dungeons and Dragons with us, and anything that would involve some level of escapism. So for him, his level of escapism was writing horror novels and pulp fiction that would be, cast into magazines of the day, and I grew up idolizing that. So of course he was a writer. I wanted to be one too. And I got away from that, in high school and college. And it turned out that I spent a bunch of time in DC as a defense lobbyist prior to COVID, and always wanted to get back to it as a deep down, blood in the stone nerd. I knew I'd come
Yeah.
back to it eventually. So I always wanted to. I guess I was emulating him and idolizing him in a way. And for me, being able to publish that first novel and now this series and things like that's a way for me to honor his what he meant to me, while also taking a little bit of a digression from his. He wrote a lot of short stories and a lot of weird, almost Cthulhu like stuff. I'm on the other side. I'm much more like Tolkienish and traditional classical fantasy, but I take his that little gothic, that little dark stuff that he had, and I spin it into mine to give it its own little flavor. So that's where that's where I came from and where I wanted to be an author. And I came back to it when COVID provided the opportunity for me to actually write something.
Yeah, COVID was a weird time, man. I
Yeah.
feel like it opened a lot of opportunities for people. It also made you kind of like really realize how much, like, dude, I've been working since I was 15. And, I work in an office, so I had an opportunity to work from home for like 3.5 months. And, dude, it was a lot of fun to be able to spend time with my family, my fiance, my dogs, and just I didn't have to fight traffic. I drive 40 minutes to work every day. So I didn't have to fight traffic, so the stress level was just gone. And I got to spend a lot of time, and I value. I mean, I know it was a pandemic and there was a lot of shit happening, but I valued those 3 months. It was a unique period for us, and like we got to play, like we play the Switch, and we'll play Mario Party and Mario Kart, and we got to just like game out and hang out, and it was a unique time in this country, honestly.
Yeah, I think if there was a silver lining, a lot of people had a chance to do the thing that they'd never had a chance to do, and I'm one of them, right? There's an entire block of COVID authors, and if you ask people during the time previous to COVID, hey, Joe's writing a book. What is he writing a book about? They would have never said fantasy adventure. No one knew me as the nerd that I truly am. I'm a defense lobbyist, so this hardcore, thick-skinned, blah blah blah. Dealing
Yeah.
with Congress, dealing with the Pentagon, and here I am writing these novels that are true escapism at their core, and they're made for entertainment, right? And I had a chance to, and for me, my downtime was more like a year. Like DC shut down. The politics of it was that no matter what, you were not coming back the way you did. And so a lot of my job became virtual anyway. I was able to do some of it through Zoom and at the time Skype and other, you know,
Rip.
yeah,
Rip
exactly.
Skype.
Yeah, like all that stuff, like those kind of things, were available to us. But my job was networking with people. My job was whining and dining. My job was being on the hill and meeting with people and convincing them. And that was all dead. I couldn't do any of that. And it's changed dramatically since then. The way that, just the way that you had access to legislators then just doesn't exist. And so for me, this was something I got a chance, like you said, recalibrate, do something that was on my bucket list. And I thought, hey, I'm going to write this one book, it's going to be one and done and I'm going to be over with. And then, my friend got a hold of it and she said, hey, this is really good. I'm going to send you over to the development editor. And he read it and edited it for me and said, you know what, this is publishable. Let me send you on to a publisher. And then one book became four books, now two series, and a bunch of other things that are forthcoming from that. So like a graphic novel series and maybe a video game. I mean, it's like it's become a second career. It's the back nine for me. Speaking of getting old, you're looking down the barrel of that, and I don't want to go back doing what I was doing. This is a lot of fun. The stress, like you said, is just off of you. And if there was a silver lining in a very horrible time, it might be this.
Yeah, I mean, so why fantasy novels? I'll tell you this: I'm an avid reader, and I don't get to read. I do a lot of audiobooks. I talk about this a lot on my podcast, but because of that drive, it's either podcasts or audiobooks, and it depends on my mood. So if I'm in an angry mood where I can't visualize things, it's podcast because I don't need to pay a whole lot of attention. But if I'm in an inspired mood or I'm like very focused, I will do novels. And I lean towards fantasy and I love sci-fi. That's my thing. Sci-fi is really my first love. Obviously, Star Wars, like that's
Yeah.
I'm a Star Wars nerd. That's what I grew up on. But I love fantasy too. So, why did you start with fantasy? Did you think about other genres, or is that what you really honed in on originally?
Well, it's something I've always wanted to do. I, like you, I'm a Star Wars and a Star Trek and an Indiana Jones and a Lord of the Rings and a Game of Thrones and a Shannara, and you just go through, and that's what I read. And part of it, I think, is because I started in my geekdom at a young age. Like 10 years old, I was into it and I
Mm-hmm.
loved it, and it was creative and it was different. And I had a chance to immerse myself in it as a writer, and I understood the genre very well. Like I've played Dungeons and Dragons my entire life. I've gone and seen every movie you can see that's related to that. I've read all of the major series that are part of it. So I've really enjoyed that. But there's part of me that also wants to write a horror novel. I've got a great idea for like a vampire novel that I didn't want to screw up until I became a good enough writer that I could write that. So I kind of put that aside for now, and it's really started hammering away and growing my authorship within fantasy and sci-fi realms, and so a little bit of dystopian stuff in there too. But like for the most part, it's always been I've always been attracted to it. It's always come natural to me. I get it. I think I understand what my readership is looking for in there. And you're right. I mean, a lot of people these days do exactly what you do. Audiobooks is the fastest growing part of our market, and it's because people are in different stages of their lives. They've got kids, they've got commutes, they're on a train, they're doing something, and they don't have time, and they want a distraction. And so for us, I've made sure that every one of my books are in e-format and audiobook format, so that people can download them and enjoy them while they're in the car, doing laundry, at the kids' soccer game, whatever it is that they want to do. But that's really why I got into it. It was just something that has always appealed to me. I've loved the genre. Um, I might migrate over and do a sci-fi thing one day. I may do something in horror one day, but I'm really set in stone when it comes to fantasy. It feels very comfortable to me.
What so are you do you like gaming at all?
Oh yeah, I've been a gamer and a role-playing gamer. So I'll do the video stuff, and I haven't done as much video stuff in the last 10 years as I used to. I used to do it every day. And then, I would say the RPG stuff I've been playing since I was 10. So 30 plus years of gaming in a variety of different ways. And you find a lot of inspiration from that. You see what people like and don't like. You get a sense of timing for things. You get a sense for the final boss, the big bad evil guy, and what you have to defeat. You get a sense of irony and pacing that comes from gaming that and a lot of it, if you're playing a role playing game, it's all it's all your audio, right? You're literally
Yeah.
telling a story as opposed to writing a story, so you tell it in a different way. Or if you're playing a video game, it's very visual, and you get sound effects around you and stuff like that that immerse you into it. You have to create that atmosphere when you write, and so I think as I became a better storyteller as a dungeon master, or I became a better gamer, whether it was role-playing games or video games, it allowed me to feel that sense of pace and that feel that sense of direction. And, in my realm, that really, really helps when you're trying to get something published. They want to know that you understand inflection of stories and where those points are, to hit stuff home. And I think it helps you with timing.
I am entrenched in Baldur's Gate 3.
Whoa, there you go.
And I'm an RPG guy. I've always been an RPG guy. Well, that's not necessarily true. So I was really heavily put into sports. My dad was like big into Madden and stuff, so it got me into it. But I've been playing games since I was 3.
Hmm.
Like, I would beat my dad's drunken buddies at Tecmo Bowl on Nintendo when I was 5. They would get
Blades of
pissed.
Steel, man.
Blade,
Blades of
yeah,
Steel. Oh, you brought
NBA
me back.
Jam.
Yeah.
My dad's buddies would be over the house. He'd be like 3 or 4 deep. They'd all be drinking beers, and I would whoop their ass, and they would get mad. And my dad has physically had to like tell them, if you don't like chill, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you because you're losing to a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
But dude, just there's nothing like role playing games that are built. I love the story, right? The gameplay doesn't have to be perfect. And recently got into Baldur's Gate 3. I kind of it's been out for I think 2 years now, and I put it off for the longest time because I don't like turn-based combat's a little weird for me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm indifferent to it. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's just there.
Well,
But I'm
it's
like,
the
fuck it.
Dungeons and Dragons thing. It's like that too. It's like rolling for
Yeah.
initiative, right? So you have to, everybody has to take their turns. I get it.
Yeah, and after you play it, you get it. But the story, have you played it?
Yeah, I've played, going back, starting with Diablo and all those games. So that's where I got immersed in that. But the Baldur's Gate 3 is the latest and greatest, right?
Dude, the story for Baldur's Gate is just it is entrenching. Like,
Hmm.
you just get so and I'm mad because today I was playing it, and it's a funny because it's a that's how role playing games are. But I'm playing through. I do this difficult boss fight. I get through the boss fight, I get out of it, I save it, and I'm like, all right, there's 3 acts in Baldur's Gate, and I'm at the end of Act 2. So I'm like, all right, let me look up a checklist, let me make sure I didn't miss anything, because, once you skip ahead and get into, like, there's points in the game that once you go past, you can't go back, and I'm like, all right, I don't want to miss anything, and you can miss companions, you can miss whole quest lines, and I realized I'd missed an entire zone where I would have missed 2 companions, a whole bunch of fucking quests. I'm like, damn it! So now
Hmm.
I know that I have to go back to that boss fight at some point, which was a pain in the ass. But the story is just, it's so good. I like to play, I guess in D&D world, I like to kind of play chaotic good. Like, I like to play that line of, all right, I'm not quite good, I'm not quite bad. The decisions I make are really for myself and where I see this going is kind of how I play. And I played D&D a couple times. Hasn't panned out because to get a good D&D group, you have to have people that are going to play seriously, and you're going to have people that play for a long time, for at least a campaign. So, but for me, I play it probably every weekends in the morning are like my game playing time. I'll play for like 4 hours straight, and you just get lost. And there's just something that it releases your stress. You just get lost in this world that's just, and that's the beauty of fantasy, right? You could just get lost in a world that obviously doesn't exist, but in your mind really does
Yeah, I think
to
that
some
that's
extent.
the value of escapism. That's why people like this stuff. And Baldur's Gate goes back to an original Forgotten Realms module. The concept of it comes from that. It's a D&D game at its role-playing game core, right? And what you've described in terms of escapism is exactly why I still play Sunday nights 6 to 10. I wish I could play more, but it's exactly right. It's almost like a reset button. It's the very,
Yeah.
very end of the week. All your familial tasks are put aside. People are going to bed. Kids are going to bed. There's nothing going on from 6 and 10 unless there's a football game on, and then we'll skip it. If there's an
Yeah. Yeah.
important
Yeah.
game on. But for the most part, that's kind of like the value that it has. It clears, it clears your mind. It opens up, your creative juices, and then, you end up, going to bed and you start your week and you're craving that Sunday night game again or something like that. So while you're playing Sunday or weekend mornings, I'm playing the very end of the weekend. But it's after dinner and people are getting together and it's just enough time as an adult to escape but leave you
Yeah.
wanting for more. I would love to play for longer. And we during holidays and stuff like that, we'll play back-to-back sessions and things like that. But you're right, and for folks like you that like the game and have never been able to do it nowadays, being able to find players online and doing it what we do. I mean, we used to play always together, always in the same place, and if you were out of the city, you couldn't play. But Zoom and Skype and all these other now these tools that Dungeons and Dragons slash any of the Hasbro stuff that any of those companies have put together that you can now play online. There's not, I mean, even here you could see a map. Like if we were playing, you could see a map online. You could roll online. All these things that you weren't able to do 5 years ago, you can now do. And the game's been repopularized through COVID. And there's a lot of people who've tried it for the first time, and it's become even more popular because actors and actresses are doing it too, and they're adding something to it. So for as as its popularity has regrown and it's shed its like nerdy kind of history, it's still there. People, we're all geeks that play it, but ultimately,
Oh yeah.
in the end, they've made it cool. And I agree with you. It's just a lot of fun, and it gets you that chance to just kind of step away from your life, and no matter what struggle you're going through at that time, the day before, the day after, you've got that time to kind of disappear into your world, and then enjoy it without the stress of everything else around you.
And rolling the dice, like even in Baldur's Gate, man. I mean, depending on what character you're playing, it's a roll of the dice.
Hmm.
You never know what you're gonna get. You roll a one and get a critical one, you're fucked.
Yeah.
So you roll a 20 and it's a crit 20, then it's great. But you don't roll either of those all the time. So I think it's cool how is it Larian, I think, games, how they did it. And I wish and we're gonna get more into books, but I wish more studios that create content would do what they did, because they came out and said, "Hey, we're not going to charge. We're not doing any. Our game is being released as a full game. There's no add-on content. There's no microtransactions. You're getting a full game and enjoy it." And I want studios to go back to that,
Yeah.
because it's like, you're paying $70. They're talking Grand Theft Auto, the new one, 6 is going to be $100. You
Yeah.
know, and it's caked with microtransactions and all this other shit, and it's just a way for them to rake in as much money as possible. I mean, this company still made $1 billion because the game was a good game. Like, that's all you need to do is go back to great storytelling,
Yeah.
get people that write well, right? Someone like you that's a fantasy writer. Get someone to come in that writes well. Make great content, and everything else will follow. But if you're just trying to do a money grab, yeah, you could do the same thing like Madden and Call of Duty does every year, where they create the same fucking game in a different atmosphere or whatever, but it's the same thing every time. There's no innovations, there's nothing new to it. I've just really enjoyed, like, it brings me back to the days of like, my all-time favorite role-playing game is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1.
Hmm.
I'll never forget playing it. I went into GameStop. I was a kid. This guy's like, I said to him, I'm like, look, I'm tired of playing sports games. I need something new. And he's like, listen, this is for the original Xbox. I was like, Star Wars? I don't really like Star Wars. I was like, how old was I? I was maybe 13, 14. And he's like, listen, if you don't like this game, come back, I'll buy it off you. I already own a copy of it. I'll buy it off of you. Like, myself. That's how confident that this guy was. Turns out, by the way, I ended up working for that GameStop.
Oh,
And
that's
that guy
cool.
was, and that I ended up being that guy's boss at some point, by the way. Because it got, like, that game, like, just took me to a different trajectory. Like, I had just graduated high school. So maybe I was a little bit older. Maybe I was 17, I think, or 18. I just graduated high school. I would get home. I worked at CVS at the time. I'd get home from CVS. I'd play Star Wars Knights of the Republic for 8, 9, 10 hours, go to bed, go to work, come home, play. Like I had no responsibility at all. That was my thing. And I did it for like 3 weeks. That game, like, I think created the nerd. Like I was always a nerd. That game like trajected me. It just projected me into a whole new nerdism. You know
Oh
what I
yeah.
mean? Like, do you have anything that happened to you like that? Like something that just kind of like propelled you into just embracing your nerdiness?
Yeah, so for me it happened a little earlier. So my fourth grade English teacher went out on a medical sabbatical, and this happened maybe mid-year, right around the semester break, and my substitute teacher somehow, some way got permission from the principal to finish the semester by reading us The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And Mr. McKinley, loved it. He was a weird dude, but man, it just hit a home run. And that Christmas, I asked my uncle. I was like, "Look, I want to play Dungeons and Dragons. I want to be part of this, right? I'm 10 years old, right, or whatever it was, And so I got my first Dungeons and Dragons box set, and I got my first copy of The Hobbit. So I was reading that, playing D&D, and that just kind of opened it all up. Now you couple that with some of those video games that were available, and you go to the old arcade stuff and you play Gauntlet, or
Oh
you
yeah.
play like you're just like, oh, that kind of stuff. You can stand there all day long, and your hands are hurting, and you can't click the button fast enough to kill all the stupid, and you love it, right? And you absolutely love it. And at the
Yeah.
time, there was such I think, a gold rush of good movies that were either sci-fi and or fantasy, and I think I had a foot in both camps, right? So like you had the revitalization of the Star Trek stuff, you had the ascension of the Star Wars stuff, and those worlds as they were kind of created, coupled, and kind of bookended with some really cool things in the middle, like Aliens and Indiana Jones, and then all of a
So good.
sudden you get the release of Conan the Barbarian in 1982, and the other movies were kind of shit, but like at least Conan was
Yeah.
it was right on the nose, and you feel all that, and all of a sudden Lord of the Rings is in your face, and you're like, and it just it was like it just really brings it out in you. And for me, it started with that at a very young age, that 10, 11-year-old age. And then it was just, I think, a cascade of really cool things that came alongside that really kind of got me not in just into the genre, but also got me into the role playing, got me to be a movie fan, TV show fan of all those kind of things. And the spin-offs, like, yeah, I guess I was in, I don't know, maybe middle school, high school, when the next generation of Star Trek came out. But then you also had the next three in the Star Wars trilogy that were, and even though we all put Jar Jar Binks aside, ultimately there was people couldn't wait for that. And I
Yeah.
I was one of those guys. And so for me, Star Wars is, you've got this space opera meets fantasy, right? And it's like everything comes together where you've got this crazy religion with sword fighting, but it's with laser swords, and it's like, yeah, you don't get much better than that, right? So
Yeah.
those are the things that sort of like culminated, I think, those, the gift of the game coupled with the unfortunate situation with my teacher that led to basically an indoctrination. It was like Tolkien 101. And
Your
I was
brain's like,
in. Yeah, I was in.
what?
I was in. The hobbits going down in the barrels in the river and out the back to escape. I mean, what 10-year-old, what 11-year-old is going to fall in love with that story? So of course I was deeply involved at that point and never looked back.
Well, here's the thing with Star Wars, and I'll say this before we move on. Okay, 1, 2, and 3 sucked when you went to the movies to see them as a kid.
Hmm.
However, if you are to watch the movies now, the proper way to watch them to make you value those movies, you don't watch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You watch 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6. It's the proper way to watch the Star Wars movies, and it will make you appreciate. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, you've seen Star Wars at this point. If not, it came out in the 80s, man. Grow up.
Yeah, too
When
bad.
Darth Vader dies, it makes you appreciate his death differently if you watch it that way, in my opinion. And that's something I went back, and my fiance is not into sci-fi, but I had her do that. She does like The Mandalorian because of a fucking
Baby
Yoda, Baby
Yoda. My
Yoda.
wife's the same way. Same way. She'll
So
watch Mando with me, but it's only because of Baby Yoda. She doesn't call it
exactly.
Mandalorian. She calls it the Baby Yoda show. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Same here. She's not into sci-fi. That's not her thing. She loves horror. We can watch horror movies and shit all day. She loves like Dexter's one of her favorite shows of all time. So like the reboot has been we watch that. But for us, the Baby Yoda for the Mandalorian is in. But if you're gonna watch Star Wars, that's the best way to do it. And in terms of like novels, um, Darth Plagueis. I don't know if you've read any of the Star Wars novels.
Are
Darth
you kidding me? Of course.
Darth Plagueis is a really good book, and for me, filled in a lot of gaps of 1, 2, and 3. You get to know a lot more about the Senate and everything, and all the things that he did to orchestrate that. But my favorite Star Wars novels, it's a trilogy, was Darth Bane.
hmm So
Darth Bane was fantastic novel series.
yeah, the Darth Bane series, coupled with the Darth Plagueis stuff, it does fill in the gap. It allows you, and that's the beauty of books in between movies. You get to build the world around it, and then for the fandom that's there, it's not just, hey, I watched a movie. Hey, I've immersed myself in this world, and I know the nuance of it, and I know what comes out of it. And there are ways you could correct it too, but you have to watch and make sure that it's, canon or no longer canon. I mean, the Disneyfication of it has really
Yeah.
kind of soured many, many people, this guy included, on
Yeah,
some
me too,
stuff.
man.
Yeah. So, and they throw out things for the sake of politics and whatever. Like, you just grow up, like get over it, right? And
Well, it was
and
a new series that got canceled after one season because they went like full on, like, all right, the Jedi. What was the big thing? It was like they made the two twins
yeah,
both
well, they made
like,
the two twins the center of the Jedi slash Sith story, right? When we all know that it didn't come there. Like Darth,
yeah,
if they talked to Lucas, Lucas was always affirmed that the chosen one that was going to bring the balance to the Force was always going to be Anakin Skywalker. And people forget that like Anakin becomes Darth, but then Darth comes back, and his redemption scene in Return of the Jedi is exactly that. He brings balance. And it's because of he has to become Darth Vader to bring balance to the Force, right? And
yeah,
that escapes the average reader, it escapes the average watcher because you're just looking and it's a pretty cool story, and there's all these lasers and electricity coming out of people's hands, and if you're not paying attention to the deep rooted story, and I think they got away from that on purpose. They wanted to kill the idea, in a Disney way, and introduce it through the lens of DEI and some other things, and just it very disappointing. Just really, and I'm not just that, but most of the stuff they've done recently has been subpar. Like I'm a sucker. I watch it all. They got my
me
money.
too.
You know what
I
I
mean, I
mean?
didn't watch the new show. I saw the bad reviews. I'm like,
You
look,
didn't
I'm
miss
not gonna
anything.
invest. Yeah, I'm not
All
gonna
you're going to
invest
do is
anything.
you're going to save yourself some heartache because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's change for the sake of change, just so you could throw it in somebody's face, as opposed to trying to do something that'll build out the the property that you've bought. This wonderful property that billions of people have watched and loved, and you destroy it for the sake of trying to change something. And I think that's the biggest problem with it. And that's why, I mean, getting back to what you were saying about the books, you have to make sure that, what you're reading, some of that, can stand the test of time. Others of it, you got to kind of like toss out. But you're right. I mean, those
Yeah,
books, some of those books, and they've got some really high end, like, the Thrawn, like those Thrawn. I don't know if you've read those Thrawn
mm.
novels. I mean, those
I didn't
kind.
watch the. I didn't read the Throm ones. That's on my list. It's on the list.
Yeah.
I think the problem though too, and I just for me, Star Wars has always been an inclusive universe where you could be green or orange or a robot and still have a say in the world. So the whole like introduce all this other DEI stuff. I don't know if I agreed with it in the Star Wars world because it was never an issue.
Yeah. Same thing with
It
Star Trek.
really was never an issue.
Star
Same
Trek
with
was the
Star
same way.
Trek.
That was a way of addressing a social issue in the 60s and 70s. That was a hard thing to do, but you can get away with that in sci-fi or fantasy because there are no
Yeah,
rules there, and so you can show an equality, by doing that instead of, and Star Trek, broke rules, right? They had interracial kisses, and they had, they showed, different races fighting one another to a genocidal end, and things like that, and they also addressed, real time stuff like the Klingons were supposed to be the communists, they were the Russians, right? And we're the good guys, right? And we're the
yeah,
Federation, and you got a lot of that with Star Wars too, where you didn't worry that Chewie was a Wookiee, right? He was just a Wookiee, right? And it didn't matter who was who. It just didn't. And I think that, but when you make a political statement out of every single show, you just lose your base, and people are crying about even the last three movies. I'm sure you have an opinion on those too, but like ultimately,
yeah.
I know, that
Just
I don't,
it's tough, man. I mean,
I don't
the
know.
last one. I think the last one, they brought what's his face back, and he tried to undo what they did in the prior movie.
Yeah, the Ryan Johnson. Yeah.
But I mean, the damage was done, man, and I mean, it wasn't like so bad that I couldn't watch it, but it just none of it made sense. It's like, you need a director. It's almost like if they took your books, right? And you wrote the first one, you envisioned everything, and then they brought in another author to write your second book, and then you came back to finish and write the third book. The second, you'd be like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
You have to stick with the creative mind, because I don't care what people say. Like we're all, like, I'm a creative, you're a creative, right? We all have different creative personalities. You just can't do it. It just doesn't, especially in a world like a Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings. You just can't do it. It just doesn't make sense, because I think it does change the source material
It
a
does. And
lot.
you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's in authorship, it's called an author's voice, right? You can tell when I've written something and when another author's written something. Then you get close, they have ghostwriters and things like that. But at the end of the day, you can tell everybody has their own style and everybody has their own voice. And you can, if you read an author long enough, you can tell when it's not them, right? And you're like, this doesn't match up. Like it's not even the same. It doesn't happen. And I think that's happened a lot there, And I knew when they brought in the guys that had done a lot of Game of Thrones things. I was like, ooh, Star Wars might ramp this up. And then they shit canned it or they walked away from it, whatever happened, and it just kind of blew up. And I'm like, ugh, And they have all of their shows are directed by somebody else instead of having a director that directs the entirety of the series. And so then you get shows that are, you'll get a series that's up and down based on the directorial direction that ultimate captain takes that on.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that has a hard time, pulling these things together. And I don't know, it's just to me, it's just not been what it should be. And it's a shame because I think a lot of folks have been disenchanted by it, and some are not going back because of it. And like I said before, I'm a sucker. I watch it like through my fingers, and just say, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm watching this," and then complain about the fact that I wasted time watching it. But it's almost like if I don't watch the train wreck, I've missed something.
Yeah.
And I just
Well,
don't
I
get how
mean,
Kathleen Kennedy and the rest of them over there don't see this as a train wreck. They see this as some sort of master plot to change. And I honestly, I don't get it. You don't have to. The thing is good enough on its own, and whatever. I can't even.
I
It's just so
agree, man.
frustrating. So
I
frustrating.
agree. I agree. And you have people that are just like hardcore to the series, and you're losing them because you're trying to make it something it's not. And
Yeah.
I think if you're like, it's never had the problem of today. It's always been in just an open series ever since it was
Yeah.
created. Um, and it's funny. I mean, look, the Acolyte was it's done after one season, so I would be shocked if they kept it canon in any way. Because everyone hated it, and then Kennedy's gone; she's stepping down. So I think because her and a lot of the main characters of that show went out on their marketing bend and we're just trashing people and talking about what how they're going to change the series, and look what happened. Everyone lost their jobs and the show got canceled because you can't do that to something like that.
No.
If it needed it, yeah, absolutely, let's shake it up. It's always been a series where you could be who you want to be, and there was no like white and black
Yeah,
and
there's no
Asian. It was
judgmental
like,
stiff
yeah,
already. Yeah, it didn't matter. It didn't
never
matter.
mattered.
Yeah, and the Acolyte, oh, just it was rough to watch. I mean, it was the worst of the worst. I mean, I liked, you know, what they did with the Mandalorian. I thought was really good. It was different. It had like a Wild West kind of play to it. It was kind of
Love the
cool.
Mandalorian.
Yeah, really
Love it.
cool. And then you look at like when they went back to Obi-Wan, the mistakes that were all through that, it was careless. They had characters in the Boba Fett series that people that were playing main characters in it that had never watched the movies. They had asked some of the actresses, and they're like, well, we never saw the original. How are you acting in a movie that you haven't seen the original? Isn't that part of the homework? Right? Like,
I
and
I
it just,
I
they didn't
still
care.
like I'm a sucker though. I still like Boba Fett. It wasn't the best. I
They
enjoyed
made
it.
the Tusken Warriors good people, and Boba Fett
I
had to be good
know.
now, and
I
and the
know.
the, the little Vespa scene outside. There was like, I mean, you're Disney for Christ's sakes, and the best you can do is that looked like I pulled it off of a ride at an amusement park, and it had some guy that was hiding underneath it, pulling it on a. It was just
The little kid in
brutally
me loved Obi-Wan. The little
brutally
kid in me
bad.
loved
And of
Obi-Wan.
course,
It
the big
was
bad monster has to be turned good, like the Bumble in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Like you don't need it. Like no, Boba Fett's supposed to be chaotic neutral. He's
yeah.
supposed to be chaotic, to use a D&D term. He's not a good guy. He shouldn't ever been a good guy. You know what I mean? And I just that was the beauty. That's why people were attracted to him, because he was a cool bad guy to cheer for. That's why people like Darth Vader. He's a cool bad guy to cheer for. It's like,
My favorite archetype, by the way, like like book wise especially, is the wow, I just lost my train of thought in terms of what's it called when it's the good guy, it's the bad guy, the arc God
like a
fucking damn it,
redemption
man.
arc.
Yeah, like I like the bad guys where it's like you see how they became bad. So like for instance, like
Oh,
I like
sure.
World of Warcraft,
Like the
right?
origin story of the bad guy. Yeah.
The Lich King was a fantastic novel
Yep.
because you see how he got to where he was. And I really, and same thing with Darth Bane. You
Hmm.
see, like, he came from this small mining planet and he had an abusive dad and all that stuff. And, like, you see where he came from and then where he ends up and how he got there. Um, what the hell's that called? That's going to drive me fucking nuts.
Well, why that's important, and I put that in my books too, is that no one's born evil. And so by them, if you're showing a character arc that tracks in a way where you as a reader, or you as someone who's watching a movie or a TV show, can identify with the mistake that they make. If they've come to you make two choices, and you can see yourself taking the same choice, making the same choices they
Antihero.
made.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Antihero. That's what it is. Antihero.
yeah,
All right.
yeah. So, but you want to cheer for the anti-hero, right? You always
Yeah.
want to. And that's the thing. And you want to have them have that redemption arc. They have to have a chance to come back. Darth Vader came back. Not everybody comes back, right? And so, like, you want that. And, and I think, for me in my novels, well, I won't ruin them, but like, there's a couple of guys that take a step back, and there's a couple of guys that don't take a step back, and I think that that's important too, because it's realistic. Not everybody can come back. So your idea of Darth Bane showing his origin story and why he became who he became is exactly what people, that's where that's red meat, for a
Yeah.
lot of readers. They want that kind of stuff. And Boba Fett, once you learn the backstory of Boba Fett, you're like, I can see why he does what he does and why he makes those choices. And then, you know, again, the whole, I mean, my God, can we get away from spice and drugs, and they're stealing it right out of Dune? It's just ridiculous. It's like so bad that it's lazy story writing. But all that aside, he's my favorite Star Wars character of all time. I want to cheer for him, and that
Yeah.
series was so blah, and I was waiting for it so much, and it went off the rails, and it wasn't as bad as Acolyte, and maybe Obi-Wan wasn't any good either, but like it was, I still watched them all to the end, to the bitter end, my friend, to the bitter end.
I just started Dune. So I've never seen anything Dune related. I never watched anything Dune, and the book's pretty good so far. I think it's like a 23 hour, or it's either 20 or 23 hour audiobook,
Yeah.
and I'm like 4 or 5 hours in. It's pretty good so far.
It has a lot of
Um,
Star. If you like Star Wars, what you do, you will like Dune. It has a little bit different spin to it, but it's a lot of the same concepts, and you'll pick up on that. You might not get it right away, but you will get it because there's a emperor, and there's a certain sect of women that have a mental power that they can kill people with. It's just like
yep.
the Force, and of course
There's
there's
Spice. Yep.
Spice.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, that's where Spice was original to Dune, and the Disney version of Star Wars has grabbed Spice and is using that too. It's a little weird, you know what I mean? That they
yeah.
run so parallel to one another, but it's good. It's good in its own way. It's just, I mean, from my opinion, it's not nearly as good as Star Wars, but
It's
um,
slow.
yeah,
It's
it's
slow.
it's plotting. It is really deep. Like if for those that like epic fantasy or things that are like epic sci-fi, there is just it goes deep. You will find every detail and every year and someone named. I mean, Herbert does a good job with that stuff. It is just it's riveting if you like that kind of stuff. It's overwhelming if you're just in it for the entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, it hasn't grabbed me yet. I have to be. I just bought your first book, by the way. Before we
Oh,
started this,
thank
I
you.
bought your first book, so I'm gonna check it out.
Are you
I have
listening
to
or are you
be.
reading?
I'm gonna listen to it. I'm gonna
Yeah.
listen to it. For me, I have to be grabbed relatively early. But I will come back. Like I always try to give a second and third chance for things. It hasn't like netted me. I'll tell you. What's the name of the book? The Red.
From the Dune trilogy or the Dune series?
No, let me go to my Audible. So
Ah,
my dude, I buy so many. I have the Audible thing, and I get so many damn books.
yeah, the
I
monthly.
just I just finished the Bobaverse series. I don't know if you've ever read that. It's by Robert or Dennis E. Taylor. Really, really, really good fucking series. Very sci-fi oriented. Um,
I'll have to try that.
but I and then the Will of Many. It's by James Islington. Really really good book. Neil Schusterman has a good series called The Scythe. It's like it's really good. I've read that. But one of my favorite fantasy series, and I don't know why it's escaping me right now. Um, the Red Rising series. Have you ever heard of that?
Red
By
Rising.
Pierce Brown.
No.
So if you leave my podcast today, I don't know if you're reading anything right now. The Red Rising series is the the most recent series from me that has just entrenched me into that genre, and I'm like chomping at the bit for it. So it's a 6 part series. Basically, it's
Okay.
about a guy. Humans have colonized our universe, right? And um, this guy named Darrow grows up on Mars, and it's a mining planet, and the way it's almost like this. The author took colors and they made them sex, okay, like SECT, sex,
Yeah.
okay, and golds are perfect, right? They're almost like the Aryans from the Nazis, right? Blonde hair, blue eyes, tall, and just perfect, ripped, and they're everything you would imagine a perfect species to be. And then you have the other colors, and they all have a sect, right? So red are they live on Mars and they mine, and then blues are smart and intelligent, and they fly the ships and all this other stuff. And this guy Darrow gets involved with a hit on Mars. They kill his wife. It's very like
Oof.
you could read in the synopsis. I think it's not anything. I'm not giving anything away or whatever.
Right.
And that spurns him to join a kind of a faction to fight against things. And what they want to do is they call them I think it's cutters or splicers. And he goes through this process of they basically create a false identity for him and turn him into a gold. So he goes through all of this like plastic surgery to turn him from a red to a gold. And he goes to this institution, like all the golds go to this institution to it's almost like going to a fancy school and they fight and whatever, and then that's what determines their status as a gold. And he goes to this and he has to fake being a gold, and he does all this crazy. It's almost like Star Wars meets Game of Thrones, and there's a bunch of crazy turns and things, and it's a fantastic series. So if you're a big Star Wars fan, dude, seriously, Red Rising, go listen to it, go read it. Please email me. You'll be like, holy shit, this is fucking great.
I'll have to check it out. It reminds me, it sounds a lot like there was and this goes back a while there, and I think there was a movie made of it too called Gattaca, where the future is determined by your birth, and they take a sample of your blood, and if you're in the 90s, you're part of the upper echelon, and you get to go into space and do all these fun things. And if you're someone else, you're just basically relegated to being a janitor, right? Like your job is to do hard labor until you're dead, and they don't care about you. And I want to say that the same kind of storyline happens where this guy wants to get into space, and he has to falsify himself in a way where he has to do piss tests, and he has to give blood samples, and he ends up doing this alongside of a character who's paralyzed and could no longer get into space because he wasted his time and became a drunkard and got himself paralyzed. And so he sells his cells, literally his blood, his eyes. This guy goes through this surgery just so they can get on into space, but he has a heart problem, and it may eventually kill him. But it's all the things he does to live out his dream, and it sounds like there's a lot of that in there, which is really cool. I love that stuff. Really
Dude,
sort of dystopian kind of future. It's
you'll
pretty
love it.
badass. Yeah, I'll
I'm
check it out.
telling you, it's called the Red Rising series. It's been the most recent series that has really hooked, like really fucking hooked me. Where I'm like, oh, I'm so excited, and I love series like yours that has 3, 4, 5, 6 books. I need to know that I have some things that I can really kind of like get into.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
where you just throw yourself into it and you become immersed in the world. That's why I think world
yeah,
building is so important in my realm.
yeah, I don't want a one and done.
Yeah.
I want like one, two, I need a trilogy at least for me. And that's actually how I pick a lot of my books. Seriously, I need like, I need to know if I'm gonna invest my time that I have this world that I can like live in to a certain degree. And I'm sure there's other people like me, but that's just me in general. I need to have that story. In terms of like you as an author, what's your writing process like? Because I've interviewed a lot of authors, and everyone has a different aspect of how they write. I interviewed a guy, he had to write in a bar. I interviewed one lady, she has to go to a retreat and not be anywhere near anybody. And she has word vomit where she'll write for 3 days straight with no showering and no eating. And what's your process look like?
Mine's a lot more boring compared to those. I look at myself as a planner, and part of that goes back to me being a nerd and a dungeon master, playing D&D for as long as I have. And when you play as a player, you don't have to do any prep work for it. You just have a character, and then you respond to what the DM asks you to do. But as a DM, you are a verbal storyteller, and you have to be prepared for different directional changes based on what the characters do. And so you have to know everything about the world. You have to know everything that can happen if they go left instead of right, or if they kill this person instead of helping that person, or if they decide not to help that person, how that affects
Stop
the
being
story.
a dungeon master.
It
It
is
is not
very,
easy.
it is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. You have to be good at it. And so for me, in order to do that, I've always built out my worlds as fully as I can. And so that's part of my writing process. I'm a big planner. I like the woman that you mentioned that could sit there and write for 3 days. I could never do that. Like for me, I'll put together an outline of my story and I'll write the end of the story first, the beginning of the story second, and then I use the outline to fill in the middle. And I write those parts, and then I go back, and even in some cases, I'll write an entire character's storyline separate of the other storyline and then mesh them together to make sure I'm not missing anything. And then in that those mesh points is where you have to kind of reformulate the story to make sure it's smooth. And when you smooth it out, that's when the story kind of takes off. And when you're writing epic fantasy, you don't have a single point of view character, right? You have multi point of view characters. You're seeing through the eyes of the villain. You're seeing the eyes of several hero characters because these are people that you're going to be with for 10 books, 20 books, whatever, however long it goes. And so
Yeah.
for me, it's really important to plan so that you're not missing any of those points. Because the worst thing that could happen to an author or a dungeon master is to not have an answer for something that the players are going to do. You can never walk away from the table saying, "Oh, I didn't think that was coming. How do I adjust to that?" Instead, you have to know where it's going. You have to know that that's a possibility. And so I eliminate all that by creating my own currency. I create my own pantheon of gods. I've created my own history of a world. I've got my own politics that are baked into the world. There's a history behind the politics of it. There's a history behind the families and the baronies and all those kind of things that are part of the realm of Warminster so that I have answers. And so that the readers will also have answers. And if they listen to or if they've read it and they understand where it's going, they'll see things coming before they happen. And of course, it's for me, that's a lot of work. But I think it's important that you know that. And so I'm not a pantser. I'm not the guy that can write by the seat of my pants and just start writing a story. I have to plan. And so for me, I'm a big plotter, and that's my writing process. Now, where I can write, I write anywhere, right? I've written on planes. I've written in my hotel room. I'll write at a coffee shop somewhere. I'll write at my home. That doesn't really bother me. I don't, but to get you the juices flowing, I'll kind of reread some of the stuff I've written or look at some of the notes and get excited about what I'm about to write. That always helps. Listening to the right kind of music or watching the right story get you ginned up and get you ready to roll. Like those kind of things are fun too. And so for me, I've got points where there's motivation that if I'm writing a romance scene or if I'm writing a battle scene, I'm listening to two different types of music. But by the same
Oh yeah.
token, it's usually planned out. Like I know where I'm going. I never sit down and just say, "Oh, I don't know what the characters are going to do today. Let's find out." Never, ever, ever will that ever happen to me. Like I know exactly where they're going from point A to point B, how they're going to get there, and what's going to happen before they get there, and then I can write. So it's a lot of planning.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if I were to write, which I've thought about, I'm very, I have just like a very, I'm a pretty good dungeon master. I feel like I would be a planner too. I feel like I would have to know, in my mind, like 5 steps ahead
Yeah.
about what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
In terms of your books, did you weave any of your real life experiences into your novels?
Oh yeah. So the politics in my books comes from my years on the Hill in DC. The some of the uh, conflicts come from international affairs, or they come from real life things I've seen in my like you know my uncle's condition, and I saw what it was like to suffer from physical disabilities as a young man. I grew up watching that happen, and so
Yeah.
some of my characters are disabled, right? And I do that in a way. So the main character is blind, save for some magic that he gets before you have a chance to even meet him. And the big bad villain is cursed without sight. And he's sickly, and you have to figure out why he's sickly and what happened to him, how he got there, and so you get this sort of like chosen one versus, the false prophet thing that comes along and bangs heads in my novel as part of the hero's journey, right? And so you've got a lot of that kind of stuff that's going on that I've taken from real life experiences, including things that I've taken from life lessons. Absolutely, absolutely, 100%. And writers know they write what they know, right?
Yeah.
So experiences that I've gone through and things that I've learned along the way are baked into it because I've experienced it. Or writers are also very observant people. It doesn't have to be us; it could be other people and how that's worked for them, or how it hasn't worked for them, and choices they've made, and even little things like quirks that people have that, as an author, you can dial up just a little bit and it makes it real something really interesting and makes it unforgettable about a character. Like one of my characters I have is my comic relief guy is this, if you can imagine it, it's sort of like a hobbit on steroids. And he rides a war dog and he fights with these serrated edge daggers. And he has a face tattoo that looks like his face is painted. It's blue. They call him Blue Connie because he has this blue tattoo all over his face. And those kind of things. And that's something that I saw, in real life, right? You see weird
Yeah.
shit, like whether it's a military thing or you see something in a bar somewhere, and those are the kind of things that grab you, and you're like, oh, I've got to make that part of one of my characters one day, and then it's fun dropping it in. And you've got those little Easter eggs for yourself or the people that are around you. They recognize their Dungeons and Dragons character, or they recognize a scenario that they've been in real life, and they're like, oh, dude, you wrote that about me. And you're like,
Yeah.
I did, but it's good. It's battle tested. People, you've seen it happen in life, and you know how people react to it. So you want to take those themes and weave them into your story.
And I feel like it makes you like more invested as well, like as an author, right?
Oh yeah,
Because you're like pouring personal things into this, things that you've seen, things that, and it also, I feel like it's got to help spurn those like creative juices to a certain degree.
oh yeah, yeah. And you can get away with a lot in fiction that you can't in nonfiction or even contemporary fiction. Because when I get in a car and drive down the street, people know what that is. I don't have to explain that in a book. But in my realm, I have to tell you, is the sky blue? Is there gravity? Are you in a horse carriage buggy? Do you have a laser gun? Like what works? And you get a chance to build all that around it so you can disguise stuff. So even the sharpest of witted people might not see it right away. And then when they finish a story, they're like, oh yeah, I remember that. That happened in my life. Or, oh yeah, that happened in my Dungeons and Dragons adventure. And you just buried it in here because it was a really cool plot angle, stuff like that too. So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So let's end on this. You talked about your series being licensed into an AR/VR video game. What is involved with that, and what is that experience like? It's got
It's
to
out
be
of
pretty fucking wild.
Well, yeah. First of all, it's humbling, right? So taking that out of the mix, that to know that it's
Your dog's
the,
like, hell yeah!
yeah, that's the husky. Yeah, he's just letting you know that he likes it too. He can't wait to see it. But
What's his
like
name?
Thor, I've got two. I've
I
got
love it.
Thor is the Siberian Husky, and then I've got a red fox lab retriever named McLeod after the
I
Highlander series.
I've Captain and Morgan.
Ah, there you go. Well played. Well played. But but like for me, having someone come to you and say, "Look, we want you to be part of the storyboarding process." In the beginning, you're worried about everything. You're worried about the integrity of your, you don't want to hand your baby
It's your
over,
baby.
right? But ultimately, you learn the lesson that if you were taking a video game and writing a book out of it, you would just ask them questions, and then I would go write a book about it. And they would say, "Well, wait, wait, wait." And you're like, "Well, that doesn't happen in books." And I had to learn the same lesson. So there are things I wanted in the game, and they're like, "No, it doesn't work that way." Because as a gamer, especially when you're playing VR or an AR game, you don't have to always follow the plot line. In my books, everything goes from point A to point B to point C, and it's exactly the way I want. It's very linear. For
Yeah,
them, you've got to take into account that someone might want to help the villain. Someone might not want to help the good guy. Someone might not want to
that's
go
true.
on the quest line. They might want to do a side quest first, or they might want to build a character in a different way. And so, as you're building an RPG game, you take all these things in consideration. And for me, I learned that early on, and I was like, look, just stay out of it. This is their medium. They know it better than I do. Just be there as a resource for them. And as long as they stay within the guide rails of that, I think that's what I found joy in, that is watching them do that as opposed to me trying to dictate things. It just doesn't work that way.
That's cool. And will that be out sometime this year, next year?
2027, it looks like.
Okay.
So they're doing, and they've teamed with Niantic, the company that makes Pokemon Go. So if for
Yeah.
the AR piece, that'll come out late 2026, and then the VR will come out in late 2027.
They were just bought by Scopely. Did you see that?
Yeah.
3.6
So,
billion.
yep.
Must be nice. I'm in the wrong industry.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's not a bad world to live in, right?
Nah, no, not at all. Well, look, man, it was a lot of fun. I know you got a lot of stuff going on tonight. Can you tell my viewers, listeners, where they can find all your stuff, how they can get your books, and let's go
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah, sure. I'm available pretty ubiquitously. If you want to go to dragonmoonpress.com, I'd love for you to buy my stuff there because I get a better royalty when it comes right out of the publishing house. But if you're an Amazon shopper, you can find it there. If you download ebooks or you want audiobooks, all of my stuff is available on places like Audible or Barnes and Noble or Rakuten. Wherever you buy your stuff, you'll find me. You can also buy it on my website at jvhilliard.com. Pretty easy to find me there. And if you want to leave me a message, I try to get back to everybody within 24 hours. I'm pretty good at that. Some folks just like asking questions or want to see the direction of the next thing. You can sign up for my newsletter there. And on socials, you can follow me at JV Hilliard Books at X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Discord.
Awesome. Discord's a beautiful thing, man. I fucking love Discord.
It is.
It's the nerd gamer heaven of being able to talk. Until I don't know, they might go public, so it could ruin everything. Every time you go public, man, it just
it takes it out of the hands. Yeah, I know. It takes it out of the hands of where it was intended to be in the first place. Was why it was made popular.
Yeah, gotta love it. My podcast, Drink Clock Pod, on all socials. Drink Clock Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And we'll have this up shortly. And look, dude, it was a pleasure having you on. A great conversation. Let's do this again in a couple months or a year or whatever. Maybe we'll do it sooner to your video game release, which will be cool.
I'll let you know. I've got a graphic novel too. We'll talk about that next time.
Cool. Yeah, I'm down, man. Look, it was a pleasure having you on, man. Have a great night.
My pleasure. Same to you. Thanks again.
On a stormy night where legends unfold, there's a podcast that's breaking the mold. Raise your voices, raise your glass high. Welcome to the Drink O'Clock Podcast. Let's fly. Oh, grab an old fashioned and join the fray. Raise your spirits, let the music play. From the corner pub to the dance hall floor. Drink O'Clock Podcast, we're ready for more. We're ready for more. With a mix of folklore and rebel cheer, we'll guide you through tales of whiskey and beer. From Irish shores to lands afar, grab your friends, it's time to raise the bar.